My project, From Burnout to Balance, explores whether generative AI, specifically conversational tools like ChatGPT, can support teacher well-being by reducing cognitive load. This inquiry was personal as well as professional. After nearly 30 years in education, I noticed that maintaining my teaching energy was starting to feel unsustainable. I wanted to explore whether generative AI could act as a partner rather than a pressure, almost like a genius personal assistant, helping teachers reclaim time, energy, and mental space to refocus on what matters most, learning and relationships. Today I'll share what I did, what I learnt, and what implications this study may have. As a teacher and leader in the primary sector, I've stood alongside educators who are deeply passionate, highly skilled, but utterly exhausted. Teacher well-being hasn't declined because teachers care any less. I believe it's declined because the system keeps asking for more, while giving less space to breathe. Administrative tasks, compliance demands, communication, and constant context switching were consuming mental space that used to be available for creativity, reflection, and relationships. Quite simply, teachers' brains had too many tabs open. At the same time, I'd been working on psychosocial risk factors within my school's health and safety processes, which pushed me to think more deeply about what well-being actually means. Not the well-being week or affirmations on the bathroom mirror, but the real human sense of having enough mental, emotional, and relational capacity to do your work without being depleted by it. My aim wasn't to help teachers do more. I wanted to explore whether reducing cognitive pressure with the support of generative AI could make teaching feel mentally sustainable again. It was about protecting thinking space rather than automating teaching. The central idea was simple. If we can close some of those open brain tabs, what becomes possible again for teachers? To support that purpose, the project had 3 interconnected goals that shaped every design decision. The first goal was to reduce extraneous cognitive load. In other words, the mental energy teachers lose to repetitive thinking that doesn't actually improve learning. The second goal was to model safe, ethical, and culturally responsive AI use, grounded in New Zealand's curriculum, values, and classroom realities. The third goal was to promote teacher-led innovation, rather than a top-down technology rollout. New Zealand-based Year 0 to 8 teachers were invited through social media and my professional networks to explore, adapt, and decide for themselves how and whether AI was useful in their context. These goals were addressed through questions that helped unpack the problem. First, I asked, what tasks can teachers say create the sense of overload? Does it match with my hunch of planning, resource creation, and differentiation? This grounded the project in teachers' lived experience rather than assumptions. Can generative AI realistically support those tasks in a way that feels helpful rather than something extra? This kept the inquiry practical and honest. I was also interested in how teachers perceived AI's impact on their practice, not just what it could do technically. All participants used a code name to keep their responses anonymous, to match data across surveys, and to encourage raw honesty in their perceptions. All this fed into the central question: how can generative AI improve teacher well-being by reducing cognitive load? This framing kept the focus on well-being, not the tool itself. The project sits at the intersection of cognition, motivation, and leadership. 3 key theories informed both design and interpretation. Cognitive load theory defines the problem. Teachers' working memory is overloaded by repetitive low-value tasks, leaving little space for creativity or reflection. This helped explain why teachers feel mentally overloaded with administrative tasks and how reducing extraneous cognitive load creates immediate benefit. Self-determination theory explains why autonomy and competence are so important for well-being. When teachers feel trusted and capable, they are more likely to flourish. And finally, distributed leadership provided the bridge to practice. It emphasises that sustainable change happens when knowledge and responsibility are shared. This idea underpinned the project's design. I didn't tell teachers how to use AI. Instead, I invited them to co-design, explore and reflect together, modelling collective learning in action. The study used a design-based research methodology. DBR was appropriate because the aim was not to just study a problem, but to design, test and refine a solution in real contexts. The process began by identifying a problem grounded in both survey data and professional observation, which pointed to sustained cognitive pressure in teachers' everyday work. A design response was then developed to address this problem, informed by research and shaped by what teachers said they needed in real contexts. This design was enacted with teachers in authentic settings, allowing it to be used as part of their normal professional workload rather than an add-on. Its impact was analysed using teacher feedback and reflective data, focusing on changes in cognitive load, decision-making and day-to-day experience. Findings from each cycle informed redesign, allowing refinement and direct response to teacher voice. This cycle repeated across 5 iterations, including a short micro-iteration with neurodivergent educators that sharpened the focus on decision fatigue, communication friction, and executive functioning demands. To understand the starting point more clearly, I began with a pre-study survey to surface what teachers were actually experiencing beneath their everyday workload. The pre-study quantitative data reinforced what I'd already suspected, that many teachers were experiencing significant cognitive strain in their day-to-day work. All except one respondent reported feeling mentally drained at the end of most school days. This mental exhaustion was not primarily caused by teaching itself, but by non-teaching tasks such as planning, marking, and resource creation. Overall, the administrative tasks of teaching emerged as a significant contributor to cognitive overload for these participants. The qualitative data put real humans behind the numbers. Many described being pulled in all directions, with meetings, leadership demands and family life all competing with the needs of their learners. Others spoke about the mental clutter of the job and sheer amount of demands. And then there were comments that were deeply personal. One participant said, "I have 2 children under 3. I feel guilty that I am exhausted at the end of the day, in the weekends, and am flat and trying to recover in the holidays. I try and spend more time with my kids, but then I feel guilty that I'm not doing enough for the students in my class." This highlighted a key driver of this project. Teachers deserve guilt-free tools that genuinely lighten the load, not add to it. It was from this place that the A. Einstein website emerged. It became the central artifact refined across the DBR cycles and was designed to be used alongside the generative AI chatbot of the participant's choice, but most used ChatGPT. It offered multiple prompt banks based on context and year group, ethical guidelines, and ready-made examples aligned with the New Zealand curriculum for years 0 to 8. Teachers used the copy, adapt, paste prompt format for tasks they found most cognitively demanding, like lesson planning and resource generation and differentiation. Participant feedback was gathered through pre, mid, and post-study surveys, Padlet reflections, and email conversations. These voices shaped ongoing redesign. Weekly emails to the participants provided light touch support, timely resources like a Matariki site filled with activity ideas, ethical guidelines, and top tips for getting started with varied entry points. Guidance around privacy laws and the critical reflection of outputs became particularly important during report writing time and in parent communication tasks. Teachers valued the clarity and reassurance and the low-stakes nature of optional participation. Each iteration made the tool simpler, safer, and more responsive to what teachers actually needed. What surprised me was how quickly teachers began sharing prompts on the collaborative Padlet, and supporting each other with comments on posts. Distributed leadership seemed to emerge naturally. A common theme emerged, that AI did not do teachers' thinking for them. It helped them think more clearly, especially when tired or overwhelmed. The matched post-study data showed clear shifts. Teachers reported reduced workload pressure, feeling calmer and more organised, and more energy for creative, responsive teaching. Some voiced hesitations, mainly around output accuracy and a sense of guilt about using AI, but those were in the minority. What stood out was that even small uses of AI made teachers feel less alone in their workload. Through this process, my own thinking shifted in 3 important ways. I learned that AI is not inherently helpful nor harmful. What mattered most was how carefully it was introduced, framed, and used with clear purpose for teachers. I learned that reflection wasn't an optional extra. It was what stopped AI from becoming just another shortcut or pressure point. When teachers had space to reflect, AI became a way to clarify their own thinking rather than replace it. I do the thinking, it does the doing. I discovered that when mental load was reduced, it wasn't just about increased efficiency and workload. It was about well-being. Teachers described having the perception of more headspace to be present, to connect, and to enjoy the relational and creative parts of their work again. These findings matter beyond this project. They point to broader implications for how we think about AI well-being and sustaining innovation in education. First, this project showed that AI can genuinely reduce extraneous cognitive load, and in many cases that relief was felt almost immediately. Importantly, that only held true when AI use was ethical and intentional, when privacy was respected, professional judgment was centered, and the tool was used to support thinking rather than replace it. Second, teacher agency emerged as essential. AI supported well-being when teachers had choice, not prescription nor prohibition, and when engagement was framed as optional, flexible, and responsive to individual needs. This work also showed that innovation is far more likely to stick when it is supported through design-based, iterative approaches, rather than one-off introductions. Teachers were able to shape its use in their own culturally and contextually meaningful ways, which made engagement more sustainable. As I reflected across these findings, a theoretical insight began to take shape. Rather than seeing AI as a traditional, more knowledgeable other, I came to think about it as an AI-mediated one, a model I refer to as A-Einstein. This idea builds on Vygotsky's concept of the more knowledgeable other and the zone of proximal development. At its core, Vygotsky argued that learning happens in the space between what we can manage on our own and what becomes possible with support from someone more knowledgeable. Traditionally, that support has been another person, a teacher, a peer, or a mentor. Building on that idea, my reflection led me to a slightly different way of thinking about AI's role. Rather than extending intelligence or expertise, this model suggests that AI may extend mental space. At moments of overload, AI can act as a mediating support, helping teachers think, organize, and clarify, and in doing so potentially expanding what sits within their zone of proximal development. In this framing, AI isn't the expert, it's the support that allows teachers' own expertise to re-emerge. Throughout the project, I kept coming back to the idea of the oxygen mask on a plane. We're told to secure our own before helping others, yet in education we often expect the opposite. This work reminded me that teachers need to sustain their own mental and emotional capacity before they can genuinely support their students. When exhaustion is normalized and dedication is measured by self-denial, it becomes harder to talk honestly about sustainable well-being. This project pushes back on that by framing teacher well-being not as an indulgence, but as a vital condition for good teaching and meaningful learning. If we want teachers to create spaces where learners can thrive, we first need to create conditions where teachers can breathe. These are some of the core references underpinning the project. Feel free to explore and share the A. Einstein website and scan the QR code if you'd like to have a closer look at the tool. And please get in touch if you have any further questions or comments.